All right, chances are this is going to be my last commentary for Grim Batol this season. 14 is most likely the upper echelon of what my group's going to be doing this season. We may get a 15 done, but we've kind of been discussing on what our expectations are for the season. And I will say that this is probably the last Grim Batol commentary. Anyways, I want to break down everything we did in this run, from routing to how I'm using defensives, offensives, things to look out for in the dungeon, mistakes that we make, and just really nerd out about the run. So I hope you guys enjoy. You saw on screen, I flashed my talents. Feel free to just go back and pause it if you want to. They're also going to be located in the description below. Anyways, starting off, we are going to be grabbing this first pack, the Earthcaller and the two other Brutes, and dragging it all the way down into the Destroyer. Now, I'm trying to LOS to make sure the Earthcaller gets down, and we just have pretty much a set kick rotation on it. And we're keeping the dragon in this particular location so we can line of sight the Umbral Wind. Then once we dodge that first Umbral Wind, we're going to be making sure that Earthcaller dies before we pull the next pack. Now, notably, we did Lust. We want to get this pack down as fast as possible. Also, the cadence of our Lust timings, we pretty much want to send it on cooldown in this dungeon. With a 35-minute timer, we can arguably get 4 Lusts out of this dungeon, which is a lot. So we're pretty much going to attempt to Lust on cooldown whenever possible. Anyways, then as we're cluttering our ground space with this poop on the ground, we are just moving along the pathway to make sure that we are able to use clean pillars to line of sight the wind until the dragon eventually dies. Now, in a 15 and 16, we would see 2 of these winds. In this key level, I believe we beat the second wind technically, but nonetheless, this is just going to be a continuous chain pull. A couple things that we're going to be looking out for here is the Overseer whenever he does Rive, and the Earthcallers whenever they do their little mass tremor casts. There's a couple of other things like these brutal strikes and earth bolts that you want to make sure you're kicking. But for me as a tank, the scariest things are going to be when the Overseer enrages, as well as enrage these other mobs. As you can see, they're enraged currently. If you saw, I actually spec'd into pressure points before the key started because there's a couple of enrages in here that are very important for you to remove. I will point those out later on. But basically, the way that I treat this is I'm never going to have more than a few dangerous mobs in the pull, including Overseer as well as Earthcaller. I don't like to pull more than one caster at a time if I can help it, but as this Earthcaller marked with stars is going to go down, I'm going to then pull the next Earthcaller in, which is this 2-pack over here. And this is going to allow us to get some additional cleave while focusing down this Overseer now. The one thing you do want to be careful of is if these brutes get too close and you don't have threat on them yet, they could do their brutal strike on whoever has threat, whether it's your healer or a melee DPS, and that could inevitably kill them. Anyways, now that Overseer is dead, we're going to pull in this last pack. So as you can see, this has just been one continuous pull. We've been in combat for a little bit over 2 minutes now. So our Shaman almost has his Ascendance again. But the big thing here is just kick bolts. The bolts aren't super dangerous as long as too many of them aren't going off, but you definitely want to make sure you're stopping these tremors. And then this pack will eventually go down, especially because our CDs were just our warriors popping CDs here, so we're going to be able to finish them off. So skipping ahead just a little bit, it is now dragon time. So we're going to just obviously mount these dragons, and we want to be as efficient as possible here now. We started running together very recently, so we haven't fleshed out who's targeting what. We're kind of just YOLOing it at this point. I'm going to try to send a couple at that moving patrol, a couple at this like second to last pack before boss. We have someone who called out, actually I believe our healer did, Mech. He called out that he's going to be sending all his #1 shots at this last pack, which should pretty much kill it. So all of us are focusing on pretty much the rest of the group. And we're going to just finish this up. Now, one thing I will just point out, this is like a side note, is my party frames look like everyone's out of range the entire time. I don't know why it bugged out in this run, but basically it looks like everyone's out of range at all times, which is a little annoying later on in the dungeon when I was like trying to heal and stuff. It definitely messed with me. Anyways, the dragon being at 10% was perfect. We are able to kind of just finish it off before it actually casted a first wind. Now, generally, I like to pull the bridge pack into this, but when we were doing it on the 16 right before this and the 15, we actually ended, no, actually the 15 specifically, we wiped when I pulled this in because we ended up kind of freaking out and not kicking the tremors, and the tremors ended up like killing us. But anyways, kick the bolts, kick the tremors, then I'm going to chain in this next pack. A lot of groups will pull this dragon, I've seen. We are not. We are just doing this pack by itself. We're doing a slightly different route through the rest of the run, and we end up timing this with, I think, a little over a minute left on the key, which we're fine with, but we're gonna make some adjustments to the route later down the road. But again, these are the same outs that we've seen, so watch out for the Rive, watch out for the Enrage, and make sure you are if you're gonna get hit by a lot of things at the same time, use a defensive. I'm trying to hold my defensives for boss. This pack though is very scary rolling in, so definitely want to be careful. I have Celestial Brew that's going to come up on this defensive, but as you can see, my health dipped extremely low. I see a lot of tanks go into this pack, especially if it's not this low as we had it, and tanks just get obliterated because they think, oh, it's, you know, at half health, so the mobs are going to die really quickly. And that's not necessarily the case, and they do a lot of their damage up front to the tank. So use a defensive going in there. Luckily, I had a Celestial Brew. But yeah. Did I health pot? No, I didn't health pot. Okay. So this boss is kind of a pain, especially when you're not playing with an AUG. So what's nice about playing with an AUG Evoker is they can remove every third tank buster bleed from you. Another thing that's a little annoying about this fight is it's a little RNG whether you're able to, basically where these lines are. So you might have to move a lot, you might not have to move at all. Basically, the mini game is healer needs to keep your group topped before every damage instance, which is roughly every 15 seconds. And as a tank, I'm going to cycle through my defensive. So on this first one, I used Aggression Module, and now I have a Celestial Brew kind of banked. One thing that tanks need to be careful of, though, is that when you have the bleed on you and then he does that commanding roar, it's sonic damage. Sonic damage is a very unique instance of damage. It's technically physical, but it ignores armor. So that doesn't matter. So it's going to hit every person pretty much the same amount. The only difference is being max health. So for a Brewmaster, we're still a little scared. And while we don't necessarily have a ton of armor, it's still going to do a lot of damage to us regardless. And we have a smaller health pool than other tanks. So definitely be careful. Don't be afraid to use defensives, not necessarily on the tank buster, but the commanding roar following that Skull Splitter cast. So I'm going to be very diligent about rotating. So here I'm using Dampen Harm. This is actually going to chain into this commanding roar, keeping me fairly healthy throughout. Before this, I was just combining things like Celestial Brew as well as my trinkets. I'm running Swarlord's Authority as well as Refracting Module. So that's allowing me to have two very short 1-minute cooldowns that are going to end up absorbing a lot of damage. One's a 50% DR. Actually, they both are. But one is more like it builds over time. And then the other one is just whenever I press taunt. So I'm using my taunt macro to basically give myself an absorb. So here I Zen Med for that. Zen Med is pretty good on this fight. There's not a lot of good uses for Zen Med throughout the entire dungeon pool, just because Zen Med's so awkward because it breaks on the first melee. But for large damage instances, a 60% DR is very strong. Next, we're going to have Celestial Brew in our back pocket at 6 Purified Chi. Now we're at 9 because I purified, then I pop that Celestial Brew. It's going to get me through most of that bleed. And then we're making sure that we're living for this group damage. One other thing you want to make sure you're doing, which I need to get better at, is using Vivify. Vivify is a very powerful healer, or heal, especially when you're playing that Shado-pan hero talent. You have one that basically increases Vivify healing on yourself by 30%. Vivify already hits for 2.5 mils, so on you, it's going to be closer to like 3. Also, big shout out to everyone who's following me. This is a very fun night. I was streaming a couple nights ago. Ended up, having a blast just streaming keys. Anyways, boss goes down. I had to do about 1 million HPS to myself, so similar to that 14 Nalathor in Necrotic Wake. All right, so we are moving into the kind of the second area, and this is probably the most dangerous or most lethal area of the dungeon for tanks specifically. And some stuff can definitely go wrong here for your group, especially if you're like not getting the proper kicks. Luckily, we have a shaman and a DK. They're not necessarily the most meta specs of those classes, but nonetheless, we have a lot of stops. So what we're doing is, because we have Ascendance and we have some of our bigger CDs, I am chaining this pack into this pull here. Now, unfortunately, I didn't roll in at the right time. Ideally, the giant would have been stunned. What was a little different is we did a 15 before this, and we got pretty deep into it, but we decided to go 14 because we weren't going to time the 15. And we got here with Lust, and I was able to pull the giant when he was stunned, so the giant died almost immediately with Ascendance. The only thing you're really keeping an eye out for here as a group is that Mass Tremor and the Changed Mind, which is a channeled stun. Now, as a tank, there's a lot of tank busters in this pull. You have the Lava Fist from the giant, which has been nerfed, this thing here. And you also have the Shadow Flame Slash from the renders. So you want to make sure you're stopping all of those, and then you also have bolts that are going to periodically go out. Sometimes they target the tank. Most of the time, they're going to be targeting your group, but you want to make sure you're stopping that. We're going to skip around Forgemaster here because of his patrol routing, and we're going to go into a different pull. Now, we don't have cooldowns, so pulling another giant would kind of be a mistake here. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to pull this Earthcaller and double Flame Render as a kind of cooldown recovery pull. Now, in the 15, we actually chained this in, and we learned our lesson. We were able to get the pull down, but we had some instances of death, so we wanted to prevent that. So in this one, we're just like, all right, let's just play it clean. We'll keep it to 3. Now, notably, the Flame Render's Shadow Flame Slash can be LOS'd, so you can utilize this pillar that I'm next to dodge, or like to basically line of sight it. In a 14, you should be fine just taking them to the face, but if you need to LOS, you can. And then after this pull, we're going to chain it into the giant to clear this area to just give us the most room possible. Throngus is over just in Narnia doing this channel. Now I rolled in right when the giant got stunned. When the giant is stunned like this, and you see this giant like concussed swirl above his head, he's taking 20% more damage. So cooldowns are going to be very effective. We have our 1.5 so we have Unholy Assault. We have the Avatar and Wreck coming out from our warrior, and we're able to burn him down 40% before he's really able to do anything. So that means I'm going to be able to, build up some Purified Chi, get a nice big Celestial Brew so I don't have to commit any defensives here, because I'm definitely going to need it for Throngus because he destroys tanks. Now, ideally, we're going to kill this giant before Throngus pats too far away, so we have to wait again to pull him. If he did, it wouldn't be a big deal. We could always do another trash pack, but in this case, we're going to get started almost immediately. I'm going to pull Throngus as soon as our healer kind of gets some healing ramped, because damage starts out pretty quick. Whenever the kind of AoE forged whatever weapon he's casting is going to do a ton of AoE damage, you kind of want to use the defensive here, but you're going to use most of your healing for his when he forges swords, and he's going to do his flurry. Anyways, Fiery Cleave, we're going to bait away. We want to just be relatively clean with this. Baiting it away just gives us the most room later on. Ideally, you want to bait it towards a wall or towards this giant fire pit that's right behind us. Now here comes Forged Swords. This is probably the most dangerous part of the fight for your entire group. He does big AoE damage, then he slams your tank with a bunch of damage, and at the same time he puts really nasty debuffs on your group, which then he will go into the Forged Mace, which will do another ton of AoE damage. So I'm going to commit Dampen Harm here, and a Celestial Brew. I still have, in my back pocket, I still have Fortifying Brew, and I also have Black Ox Brew, so I can always reset if I need. Vivifying myself, just in case. My healer's mostly going to be focused on our group at that point. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run when this maze happens. I'm going to utilize this pillar to kind of tweak him out a little bit so he just walks back and forth. You can kind of trick him a little bit there. Unfortunately, he was too far away to actually utilize that strat. But anyways, group damage comes out, and then we're going to need to bait this Fiery Axe. Now, I don't do a great job positioning him here. We do an okay bait, kind of. We're not going to need this area. The boss is low enough, but not necessarily the best spot to bait the axe. What we're going to do is we're going to move up to the top of the stairs because we don't want to be LOS from our healer. So everyone's going to move up. And this is when my unit frames actually started messing with me, or my party frames, because I thought people were LOS or at too far away. And I was like, where is everyone? But ends up being fine. This time I'm committing a Black Ox Brew into a Celestial Brew reset, and I'm using Diffuse Magic. This Molten Fury does magic damage. So Diffuse Magic is a really strong cooldown here. You could technically Zen Med one hit of it, but it's just not all that great for it. Everyone's going to stay nice and healthy. And we are going to then kite this guy away, trying to keep him towards the edge of the room so the fire doesn't eat up all of our floor space. The guy's almost dead. He's at 20%, so we don't have too much longer to go. I'm going to roll back into the corner, and then once he stops that, we're going to get on top of him. I'm pinging to make sure our group knows to bait into that corner. We lived through the cast, and so all we have to do is bait here, and we should be able to finish this guy off before his Forged Swords ends up finishing, or I should say that phase of the fight. Right here, now I have the Aggression module. I still have Fortifying Brew available. I popped a Celestial Brew just to stay healthy through this cast. I'm Vivifying my group to keep them, or attempt to keep them healthy. Again, a Vivify crit could be 30% of someone's health. So you can really, really save someone in those kind of situations. Now, if you don't crit, of course, it's only going to do 1 million healing, but that's fine. Now, this is funny. So what happened here was our DK's mouse died. So we're going to play the next pull without him, which is not necessarily the smartest thing. He said, give me a second. So I was thinking oh, it's going to take him literally a second or two to change the batteries or something. So we'll start heading over to this next pull so we can just do it. I also want to make sure I'm pulling this pack when the giant gets stunned, because we want to take advantage of that damage amp. But we didn't have our DK for actually a lot longer than I thought. So I roll in and my group's why are you pulling? Why are you bullying? Our DK's not here. So you can see on the minimap in the corner, he's just sitting way back there. So while we did get the damage jump on this giant, like it's gonna be a long pull. We're down a kick, we're down damage, so it's just not necessarily the best thing to do, but it ended up being okay. It just took a little longer than it should have. Shadow Flame Bolts are going to target random people most of the time, and then also we want to make sure we're keeping this Chained Mind. If the cast starts or the channel starts, you can actually use additional kind of CC like Paralysis, Leg Sweep, Ring of Peace to interrupt them. Ideally, you want to just try to maybe just kick them or utilize some other kind of knockups or stuns from other people, but the Brewmaster also has quite a kit there. So our DK got there a little late, so that's why his damage is so low. He wasn't there for the majority of the pull. This group damage we're going to do AMZ for, which is great. Honestly, we probably could have saved it. I think at this point, the Giant was fine. I think saving it for the next pull, which is going to be pretty big, would have been a little better. Now we're going to go into this next pull with a lot of CDs. We're going to have all the Unholy DK CDs, obviously. Ascendance is now up. We don't have Lust because we sent Lust at some point. I don't remember. I think we sent it on Boss. And then we're going to have our Warrior CDs in 15 seconds. So what I'm going to do, and this is really scary to set up, and I don't do it perfectly because I thought I had Dampen, and I didn't. So I hit Dampen, and I was like, oh shit, I don't have it. So I Health Pot, and then I believe I'm going to pop both of my trinkets. I'm then going to pop Fortifying Brew, and then we're going to start building on that Purified Chi. So left, right, as well as the Patrol. Make sure you're kicking the Chain Mind from the Beguiler, and then you also want to kick Shadow Flame Bolts because the overlap with other mechanics will end up being lethal for your group. And you're going to actually see that here in a couple seconds when I think our Druid ends up getting hit by a bolt, which we could have stopped because we all had kicks available, but we're going to need to probably workshop having the right people target the right things. Now, I wasn't looking at my health here, and I was at 1 health because of stagger. Because I was like, where's my group? My party frames were messing with me here. And then I just end up topping. Just fun fact, if you didn't know this, stagger can never kill you. It'll only ever bring you to 1 health. So if you're out of combat and if you don't have any dots on you but stagger, you can just let the stagger tick out. You don't have to purify. You don't have to use Celestial Brew. Just let the damage happen because it won't kill you. Now, in this pull, I wanted to just take a second to get it set up because our healer just got back. I wanted to give him a second to kind of get things ramping before I chain. And then we're going to have basically Enforcer, 3 Warlocks, and a Beguiler. So make sure we're stopping the Chain Mind, kicking as many bolts as possible that go through. And then the Enforcer, this is the mob that enrages, and this is why I'm playing Pressure Points, because being able to remove this is going to prevent me or allow me to not have to kite. You can also kite just by running away. You can also stun, like a good solid stun on this guy will also cause him to drop stacks. Rolling away like this with Ring of Peace also allows you to do it. What I like about Ring of Peace kiting is it keeps the mobs in like the Earthquake, and they basically stay in that position for 8 seconds while I kite. So not a bad strategy. One thing I need to do better here is I need to kick. I don't think I've kicked for now 2 pulls in a row, despite Flame Bolts getting through and killing people. So I do need to get better at that. But we're on a really good pace. We're on a really good pace. Getting here around the 18-minute mark is really good. We're going to have Lust for 3rd boss, and we're going to have Lust ideally for the last boss as well. So we're looking good. If we can get to the next boss by the time Lust is off CD, we're kind of golden. So anyways, we're going to do this 4-pack. What I've done in the past is I've done bigger pulls earlier, and then I actually will double the last pull up with this, but just the pull cadence was a little off, especially running with a new composition. Just these are the same mobs, though. There's nothing really to note here. When you only have these 4 mobs, there aren't any defenses I really need to utilize. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this Lava Bender to us with Provoke. So Provoke is going to speed him up so I can get him here before he does his Shadow Flame Blast like that, so we can actually dodge the frontal easier. Anyways, we're going to spread out for the Dark Eruption. And ideally, what's going to happen is we're just going to be able to blast this guy from 50 to 0. So once he hits 50% health, he ascends. And when he ascends, he all of a sudden starts radiating damage. Think of bow breakers or bow breakers, whatever they're called in Misatuna Scythe. When they hit 50, they do big damage, except the thing with a Lava Bender is they continuously pulsate damage until they die. So the AMZ goes down, which is really good. And then he'll eventually die. I don't know if we lose anyone here. I think I try to Vivify to keep our healer healthy, and our warrior almost dies, but we're good. So we are skipping the right side Warlocks. I've seen a lot of groups pull these, and they skip something else somewhere else by pulling a dragon earlier as well, but this is just the route that we end up doing. So now we're pulling just 2 Beguilers and Flame Renders, and then when that Patrol gets here, that's when we're going to pull him in. So this pull by itself is very not lethal. The only thing you need to keep an eye out for is the Flame Render does a frontal at a random player, and the Beguilers do their stun. So if someone's stunned and the Flame Render wombos that with a Shadow Flame, or the whatever the frontal is, it could kill someone. So here comes the Lava Bender and the Warlock. I drop a Nox statue just so I can get AoE 10 pretty easily. Sometimes when packs or some kind of patrol is chaining in, especially when DPS are already doing their cooldowns and shit, it can get really scary. Now, one thing we did here, which I don't know if this is a mistake or it's not a mistake, but our DPS are very good for doing this. They just sent their cooldowns to get this Lava Bender down because they're very lethal. It's the last one we're doing. Once we kill this, we're good to go. But it just felt like kind of a waste to send all those CDs there when this next pack, I could have just like pulled this in as well and we could have actually fully utilized those CDs. So that's something that we're going to be looking to do in the future, is to really optimize that damage, because it just feels like a waste when you're only sending it on 2 targets or sending on targets that are already like 60% health. This pack, Enforcer is the big scary thing for the tank. The Warlocks just cast a couple of bolts every once in a while and they do the curse. We have 2 curses spells though, and we have Spellreflect and AMS. So in terms of cast, we're not too concerned with that. This Enforcer is at, he hit 5 stacks, but then we stunned him, so we're good. I don't feel like I have to kite here. Generally around the 7 stack is when you're going to want to start kiting, but up until this point, we felt fairly healthy. We have a Soothe on the Druid, I have pressure points, and also Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep can also put in a lot of work. So making sure that we're kicking bolts. And now I want to be healthy before this next pull. I'm waiting a second because our Druid asked me to, and then we're going in. So again, now we have double Beguiler and double Flame Render. So double frontals, double stuns. We want to make sure we're locking all of those down whenever we can. And then for tanks specifically, the Shadow Flame Slash, especially when 2 of them go on you and you have 2 stacks of the debuff, it is doing a fair bit of ticking damage. So you do want to be a little careful. Again, you can LOS it, but just use it offensive. You're not going to need shit for the next fight. Like, as a tank, you're not going to need stuff until phase 2. So use your defensives early on in this pull if you need to stay alive, because you have some downtime here. This is a common strategy you're seeing in higher keys now. Basically, you skip around these Lava Benders. They will pretty much kill your group above a 14 level. Unless you have like crazy healing or crazy damage or you're lusting them, you're going to want to pull the boss and just skip around these guys. And the way you skip around them is you're going to do a strat in phase 2 that allows you to not have to move. Now, unfortunately, I have a horrible POV, but I'm going to still talk about the strat and what we're doing exactly. So this guy doesn't really do much in phase 1. He's just going to put out curses. Curses can get dispelled or healed off. Dispelling is the most effective global, but again, you could just do some healing throughput. It's not a big deal. And then we're going to keep the spirit away using things like Ursols, things like Ring of Peace. We can also stun, slow, etc., and we're going to cleave them down. Now, we want to push this guy at this level. You want to push him basically before he spawns a 3rd ad. So the 2nd ad spawn is fine. We're going to now push him, and then we're going to spend this time that he's jumping off the edge and getting on his dragon. We're going to spend this time killing the spirit. I'm going to just use Touch of Death because I'm not going to have a good time to use it later in the fight. I'm going to come into this corner, set down a Transcendence, and then come back out to pull the dragon. DPS need to be very careful here not to accidentally hit the Lava Benders. So don't attack the dragon or Valiona until you get back into this corner. I'm going to Transcend, Provoke, and now the boss is in this corner. So what it's going to do is it's going to force the ads to spawn underneath the boss. It can bug out every once in a while, but basically this fight becomes like a target dummy. So I'm going to move forward, I'm going to get a leg sweep, then I'm going to back up, we're going to get knocked back. My group's getting sent directly behind the boss, but now they can just hold W. What's also nice about the strat is because the way that the tornadoes spawn, the group is just standing right there, right behind the boss, and no tornadoes will ever hit them because of the way that they spawn with the dragon in this exact position, and we're not moving the boss at all. And then the frontal, I've seen some tanks eat it, which you can. You can dodge it, so I don't know why you wouldn't dodge it, but anyways, it doesn't matter. The frontal doesn't do a ton of damage. If you are going to take it and get hit by it, try to utilize just a defensive. So just rotate through, whether it's Luscia Brew, whether it's like Dampen Harm or Diffuse. Now, the other thing that's a little annoying about this strategy is for the tank, the tornadoes go through the wall, and sometimes they will hit you, and sometimes they won't. If I go all the way up against the wall, I can dodge them, but I also want to make sure I'm helping my group with things like Ring of Peace, things like Leg Sweep, obviously damage on the ads that spawn. So if you are going to take a couple of them, just make sure that's when you're using your defensive. So I like to use my defensives for the tornadoes, and then I dodge the frontal. But I also see a lot of tanks basically dodge tornadoes and then use their shit for the frontal. So here we are, we're getting knocked back. I'm in the corner again. And then I am so I use Ring of Peace to keep the spirits underneath the boss. Now, the one thing that happened here was one of the ads spawned actually far away, which created some issues. That can sometimes happen based on the boss's, like, where the boss is facing. I accidentally moved out early, so that was my fault that the ad spawned in a weird spot. But basically, this is turning into a target dummy fight, but your entire group needs to know what to do. So we have to be careful about A-Bomb Limb. If our DK uses A-Bomb Limb right when ads spawn, it can grip the ads onto the DPS, which will kill them. If they position slightly off to their right, they could get knocked into the lava benders we skip, so that would be a wipe. So there's kind of those nuanced things. Also, basically, the hitbox is massive. You can see where our DPS are standing. As long as you're on the edge of that ring, the boss's hitbox, you'll never get hit by a tornado, and you'll never get hit by ads immediately, and then you can just CC them, and they should die underneath boss. Now, I don't know if my thing should have captured this, but basically this next pull is very scary, but I actually end up DCing here. So this ends up getting really scary. So this pull, Flame Renders, Enforcers, very scary for tank. Warlocks, Begatherers, very scary for your group. So you can see here, I am DC'd. My game is not working. I am actually kind of freaking out. Somehow I live, despite getting hit by a frontal and being DC'd for, I don't know, 7 seconds, 8 seconds. And we come back, no one died. We did pop Earth Ellie, which ended up being a huge help. But that was obviously a big, scary issue. So I'm going to use Ring of Peace to kind of just kite here. I'm trying to get my bearings at this point, because when you get DC'd like that, it's probably one of the most tilting things for me. Isn't necessarily like bad performance gameplay-wise, whether it's me or my group members or whoever I'm with or pugs. DCs trigger me so much. So after getting DC'd like that for a short bit, I'm trying to like get my bearings back together. So I played a little bit more defensively by just Ring of Peace, kiting, figuring out, okay, do I have threat on everything? What's going on? Anyways, pull goes down pretty easily, so we'll go into the dragon pull next. You pull it into this little alcove, and you go onto like one of the two pillars, then you line of sight. At the same time, someone's going to be dropping poop. So when that happens, they're most likely going to drop it on the pillar that you were on. So what you want to do is you want to shift over to the other pillar, or I guess the other edge, so people can LOS there. Now Twilight Flame goes out. Oh, the first time I think we might have AMS'd it, so we got pretty lucky there. And so there's just like no poop to deal with. So then we could have LOS there, but we killed it beforehand. And now these pulls are pretty chill. Like, they're kind of introducing you to the boss fights mechanics. When hatchlings die, they make you take more shadow damage. And then the Mind Piercer from the Corruptor will do shadow damage to a specific target. What's interesting about this, though, is one, it could be shadow melded off. So if you are being targeted by it, once the channel starts, you can't do it beforehand. If you do it beforehand, it'll like recast it on someone. But if the channel starts and you shadow meld, it'll actually just cancel the cast and he'll continue just like mailing the tank. Now, one other thing you can do, and that's why I'm tanking him on the corner here, is if you are targeted, which our shaman is about to be targeted by him, you can line of sight behind the pillar. And while he won't necessarily it won't cancel the cast, it'll force it to go onto someone else. So our shaman LOSs, then he's going to try to recast on our shaman again, who LOSs again, and we don't take damage from it. So this is extremely powerful once you start getting into these levels where that will kill you after just a couple of ticks, especially when you have all these hatchling debuffs on you. Now, what you could do with this pack is you can bring it up the hill or up the stairs to that corner again, or you just have to kind of do this one natty. We decided to do it natty. We're gonna once the hatchlings die, we're just gonna face tank this corruptor. People are either gonna shadow meld or they're gonna die and run back. We probably could have prevented some deaths here, but that's fine. But going down the staircase with 6-ish minutes left is plenty of time. This last boss isn't really a DPS check. He doesn't have as much health as some of his other counterparts of bosses in this instance, or even other dungeons, but it's a hard fight. So if you execute it well with a good bit of time left, it's going to go down pretty quickly. Now, that same strategy we used in the first pull, we can use here, but it's a little bit trickier to pull off. You have to pull these corruptors up against this lip, or this kind of edge of the wall where it kind of triangulates into the stairwell, and you can utilize the edge of the wall to LOS. You can see our shaman is over there on the star marker or near the star marker. So if it goes on him, he's able to kind of just dip into LOS. Now, it's kind of finicky, but this is another strategy that you can utilize. Now, it is a little annoying to dodge the swirls when you're in the corner, and there are some weird stones as well that you can get stuck on, which I've definitely got mind controlled in this corner before, so definitely want to be careful on that. But these mobs are going to end up going down pretty easily. I think someone died. So this is another thing, like what I said about my party frame. Someone died. I don't know who it was. I think it was our warrior. I think Wooby died, and he's running back. So this pull's going to take a little longer than it should have. But going in, we're trying to budget like 3:30. 3:30 to 3:45 for boss is like perfect. So as long as we have basically 4 minutes, we're going to feel very comfortable in this instance. And this gives us exactly 100% count as well. So this boss fight, there's a lot going on. I don't play it well. I could have played better defensively. I don't die or anything, but there were some spooky moments that didn't need to be that spooky. We let our healer get a little bit of mana. Again, we are absolutely fine. We're an extra like minute or so on this fight. I'm going to pull him a little bit towards the center. Just so we have a higher chance of or a shorter run to go to the first spot. But the problem with pulling him to center like this is that more tentacles tend to spawn near the center of the room. So when you do it like this, you do have to be a little careful at the start not to get clipped. And the first spawn is actually going to be where he started, so I didn't really have to move him anyways. But we do want to be careful of the one tentacle right underneath him. But we have warriors who can spell reflect. And we have our DK who can AMS and or Icebound Fortitude to remove tentacles. So pretty much on every set, we can just get rid of tentacles wherever we're at. So we have a very good comp for this boss, actually, in particular. So this is where the fight gets scary for the tank. He's going to do Crush, which I should have used the defensive for. I just raw dogged it, and I got absolutely slapped. And then right when he hits you back, you want to get back on top of the boss where your group is stacked so you can pick up adds. And the adds hit the tank really hard when there's 7 of them alive. So you also need to not kill them right away, though, because if you kill them too early, that damage that just happened there, that damage instance from the Void Surge just does a ton of damage. So you definitely want to delay getting the debuff for as long as you can. I'd take a really weird route. Actually, no, never mind. It's in the center. But look at how many tentacles there are. But luckily, Spell Reflect will be able to help clear them, but also AMS / I think Icebound Fortitude just clear them as well. So luckily, we're able to actually get through that phase without anyone getting tentacled, which is good. And now, same thing here. I'm going to get knocked, which I then transcended to counter. And then we're going to just try to use our damage to obviously get threat and everything. So then I commit Dampen Harm. I Dampen Harm, I believe, the Crush. But this is so tanks are extremely susceptible to dying when adds are out right after that Crush, because the Crush dips them low. Adds do a ton of melee damage. You can't necessarily dodge or block every single hit. But I'm just playing poorly, I guess, as well. All right, so we're positioning ourselves for this next little Gale. We have a couple of things in here. We can use AMS to clear as well as Spell Reflect if needed. Now, luckily, we high rolled the AMS, so it went on our DK and our Shaman, but because our DK was inside of that AMS shell, he did not get the debuff. So we're going to get our last Crush here. Generally, you're going to have to do this 3 times in this key level, or you should if your damage is high enough. If you get a 4th one, you're probably a little slow. So we want to budget our defenses for those 3 hits. So I should have used Dampen on the first, and I could have used Dampen on the third. Instead, I used it on second, and I only got 1 use from the fight. Ring of Peace to help nullify the melee hits on me from the hatchlings, to try to soften that damage that I was taking, and using Leg Sweep to keep them stunned. So here comes our last little surge, but we're going to be able to kill here. In a higher keys, you're probably going to see you're going to probably see this through. Lust just came up. We're going to pop Lust here, but it won't matter because the boss is at 5% health. And with a minute and 10 left or a minute and 11 left on the timer, we killed and dispatched Erudax. But yeah, that's the run. Not perfect. The DC didn't help. The mouse issues didn't help. This was our first time running this route specifically. We were kind of workshopping it. My route before was much worse. It definitely included all of the lava benders. So I'm very proud of this run, despite some of the issues. I didn't play well defensively on the last boss, which I definitely want to improve in the future. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any questions. Of course, my talents will be located down below. They were also at the very start of the video for just a second or two. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.